The Houston sun cast a warm glow over the modest brick building of the Haven, a shelter for veterans who had nowhere else to turn inside. Nora Beacon Walker bustled through the hallways carrying a tray of medications and warm meals. Her movements were quick, precise, yet gentle as she checked in on the residents' men and women who had given everything to serve their country, but had returned to face battles of a different kind for Nora. This wasn't just a job, it was a calling. As the daughter of a decorated Vietnam War veteran, she had grown up hearing stories of camaraderie, sacrifice, and resilience. After her father passed, she dedicated her life to helping those who had walked similar paths, creating a space where they could find comfort and dignity. Nora, a gruff voice called from the common room. She turned to see Franklin Sarge Mitchell, a veteran in his 70s who had become the unofficial guardian of the shelter, leaning on his cane. His posture still carried the discipline of his military days, though his once steely frame had softened with age. Nora, he repeated, his expression a mix of concern and urgency. There's trouble outside. A group of bikers just pulled up. Nora's brow furrowed. Trouble wasn't uncommon at the Haven. There were always those who saw the shelter as an easy target, but the presence of bikers was new. What do they want? She asked, setting the tray down and wiping her hands on her scrubs. Not sure, Sarge replied, but their leader is a mean-looking son of a gun, calls himself Troy Viper. Morgan. Taking a steadying breath, Nora followed Sarge to the entrance. Outside, a line of motorcycles gleamed under the midday sun, their chrome accents reflecting a blinding glare. At the center stood Troy Viper Morgan, a towering figure with a snake tattoo winding up his neck. His black leather jacket bore the emblem of the Shadow Serpents MC, a coiled serpent with things bead. Nora stepped forward, her chin high despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. Can I help you? She asked, her voice firm but polite. Troy turned slowly, his cold eyes scanning her from head to toe before a smirk spread across his face. You must be the angel running this little operation, he said, his tone dripping with mockery. We've been hearing about this place, and I got to say it's prime real estate for some extracurricular activity. Nora's stomach tightened. This is a shelter for veterans, she said firmly. We don't have room for anything else. Troy chuckled, the sound low and menacing. See, that's where you're wrong. A place like this, it's perfect for hosting underground fights, quiet, out of the way, and no one's going to come poking around asking questions. Nora's eyes narrowed. I think you need to leave. Troy's smirk vanished, replaced by a hard glare. He stepped closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over her. I don't think you understand, lady. This isn't a request. Sarge moved to stand beside Nora, his cane planted firmly on the ground. You heard her, he said, his voice steady and unyielding. Get off this property. Troy's gaze flicked to Sarge, his lips curling into a sneer. And what's an old man like you going to do about it? Before Sarge could respond, another sound cut through the tension, the deep rumble of a motorcycle engine. Nora turned to see Logan Shield Parker pull up, his presence as commanding as ever. Logan was a younger veteran, but his years of service had left their mark in the form of sharp instincts and an unshakable sense of duty. Logan dismounted his bike and walked toward them, his expression unreadable but his movements deliberate. Is there a problem here? He asked, his voice calm yet laced with a warning. Troy chuckled again, but there was less confidence in his tone now. No problem, just a friendly visit. Logan's gaze didn't waver. Friendly or not, it's time for you to leave for a moment. The tension hung thick in the air. Troy glared at his jaw tightening, but after a long pause, he signaled to his crew. Let's go-y, said his voice low and begrudging. The bikers mounted their bikes and roared away, leaving a trail of dust in their wake. Nora exhaled, the adrenaline leaving her shaky. Thank you, Logan, she said, her voice quiet but sincere. Logan nodded. This isn't over, he said, his eyes fixed on the disappearing bikers. Guys like that don't take no for an answer. Sarge placed a hand on Nora's shoulder. He's right. We need to be ready. Nora nodded, her resolve hardening. Then we'll be ready. The evening sky was painted in hues of orange and pink as the residents of the Haven settled in for another quiet night. Nora Beacon Walker stood in the small kitchen packing a basket of food for one of the shelter's elderly veterans. She glanced out the window at the peaceful courtyard, unaware of the shadow lurking just beyond the perimeter. The stillness was shattered by the sound of a crash. Nora froze, the clatter of breaking glass echoing through the shelter. She ran to the front room where a group of Residents had gathered near the broken window, shards of glass glittering on the floor. "What's going on?" Nora asked, her heart pounding. "Look," one of the residents said, pointing toward the wall. Spray painted in red were the words, "Leave," or "Pay the price." Before Nora could process the message, the sound of motorcycles roared to life just outside the shelter. She rushed to the door and flung it open to find Troy Viper Morgan and his crew from the Shadow Serpent MC circling the property like predators stalking their prey. "Evening, Angel." Troy called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "We thought we'd leave you a little reminder of our offer." Nora's fists clenched at her sides. "Get out of here, Troy. You have no right to be here." Troy dismounted, his bike striding toward her with a smug grin. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said. "But guts one won't protect this place when we're done with it." Nora didn't flinch even as the bikers behind him revved their engines, their laughter adding. To the tension, she could feel the fear bubbling inside her, but she refused to show it. "You think you're scary?" she shot back. "This shelter has survived worse than you." Troy's smirk disappeared, replaced by a cold, calculating glare. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You're playing a dangerous game, lady, and when you lose it won't just be this shelter that pays the price. It'll be you." The sound of footsteps behind her made Nora glance back. Franklin Sarge Mitchell had appeared in the doorway, his cane in one hand and a stern expression on his face. "You've said your piece," Morgan Sarge said, his voice steady. "Now leave, but before I have to remind you what an old soldier can do." Troy chuckled but took a step back. "Oh, I'll leave," he said, motioning to his crew. "But don't get too comfortable. We'll be back." The bikers roared away, leaving a trail of dust and tension in their wake. Nora turned to Sarge, her hands trembling. "They're not going to stop, are they?" "No, Sarge," said his voice grim. "And next time, they won't just break a window later that night." Nora drove home, her mind racing with thoughts of how to protect the Haven. She was halfway down the dark, empty road when the sound of motorcycles filled the air. Again, her stomach dropped as headlights appeared in her rearview mirror, growing closer with every passing second. The Shadow Serpents had been waiting for her. Troy pulled up beside her car, his expression predatory. "You didn't think we were done, did you?" he shouted over the roar of his bike before she could react. One of the bikers threw a chain at her car, the heavy link smashing into her windshield. Nora screamed, gripping the steering wheel as she struggled to maintain control. The bikers laughed, circling her like sharks. Troy leaned closer, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This is just a warning, Angel. Next time it'll be worse." As quickly as they had appeared, the bikers sped off into the night, leaving Nora shaken and terrified. She pulled over to the side of the road, her breaths coming in short gasps. Her fear quickly turned to anger as she sat there clutching the steering wheel. "They think they can scare me," she muttered, her voice trembling with rage. "They have no idea who they're messing with." Nora wiped her eyes, her resolve hardening. She grabbed her phone and dialed the only number she could think of. "Logan," she said when he answered. "I need your help. The headlights of Logan Shield Parker's motorcycle pierced the darkness as he pulled into the gravel lot of the Haven. The rumble of his engine echoed against the quiet night, announcing his arrival. Nora was already there, pacing anxiously in front of the shelter. Logan dismounted his bike, his sharp eyes scanning her bruised car parked nearby. The windshield bore a spiderweb of cracks, and the hood was dented from the chain thrown earlier. He strode toward her, his voice calm but firm. "What happened?" Nora stopped pacing and turned to face him, her arms crossed tightly as if to hold herself together. "They followed me," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "Troy and his gang. They attacked my car and said next time it'll be worse." Logan's jaw tightened and his hands clenched into fists. At his sides, they crossed the line. He said, his tone low and dangerous. "I warned you they wouldn't back down, but this is personal." Nora nodded, her fear melting into anger. "I don't care how dangerous they are. Logan, I'm not letting them take this place from us." Logan gave her a sharp nod. "Then we fight back, but we do it smart inside the shelter." Franklin S. Mitchell sat at a table, an old map of the property spread out before him. Despite his age, his mind was sharp, and he was already thinking. "Like a strategist, we've got vulnerabilities," he said as Logan and Nora joined him. The back gates busted, the windows are too easy to break, and there's no way to monitor the perimeter at night. Logan leaned over the map, his brows furrowed. We'll fix the gate and board up the windows first. I'll get a few of the guys to set up motion sensor lights around the property. If those bikers come back, we'll see them before they get close. Sarge nodded approvingly. Good, but we need more than just defense. We need people. Numbers matter in a fight like this. Nora's gaze flicked between them. Do you think the other vets will help? Logan straightened up his expression. Resolute, if they know what's at stake, they will give me until morning. I'll round up the crew by dawn. The faint sound of engines filled the air again. But this time it wasn't the Shadow Serpents. Logan returned with a small group of riders, all clad in the unmistakable leather jackets of the Vietnam Vets MC. The Silver Eagle emblem on their backs gleamed in the morning sunlight as they dismounted and gathered around the shelter. Among them was Donnie Hammer Evans, a grizzled veteran known for his non-nonsense demeanor, and Radu Simmons, who carried a medical kit slung over his shoulder. Nora, Logan said, gesturing to the group. Meet your reinforcements. Donnie gave her a nod, his voice rough but kind. Logan told us what's going on. We not letting those punks take what's yours or ours. Thank you, Nora said, her voice thick with gratitude as the veterans began their work. The shelter transformed into a fortress. Donnie and Sarge worked together to fix the back gate, welding new hinges and reinforcing it with steel bars. Logan led a team in boarding up the windows and installing motion sensor lights at key points around the property. Ray set up a small medical station in the corner of the common room, preparing for the worst, but hoping it wouldn't come to that. Meanwhile, Nora worked alongside, them refusing to stand by. Idly, she painted over the hateful message scrawled on the wall. Her hands steady even as her mind raced with thoughts of the Shadow Serpent next move. As the day wore on, the veterans and residents gathered in the common room for a meeting. Logan stood at the front, his posture commanding but approachable. We've done what we can to secure this place, he said. But if they come back, and they will, we need to stand together. They're not just attacking this shelter. They're attacking what it represents. Sarge added, his voice carrying the weight of decades of service. This is about more than just bricks and mortar. This is about dignity, about honoring the sacrifices of those who've walked through these doors. The room fell silent for a moment as the weight of his words sank in. Then Nora stepped forward, her chin high in her voice, unwavering. They think they can scare us. They think they can take what's ours. But they're wrong. We're stronger than they'll ever understand, and we'll prove it. A murmur of agreement rippled through the group, growing into a chorus of determination. As the sun set once again, the Haven stood ready, not just as a shelter but as a symbol of defiance and unity. The hum of Logan's motorcycle broke the early morning stillness as he rode along the back roads outside Houston, the Silver Eagle emblem on his jacket catching the light of the rising sun behind him. The rest of the Vietnam Vets MC followed their presence, a quiet but powerful reminder of the strength that came from unity. Logan's mind was focused on a singular goal, rallying every ally he could find to defend the Haven after the Shadow Serpent escalating threats. It was clear that this fight would take more than just a few veterans to win. Their first stop was an old gas station, a known meeting point for other veteran bikers in the area. As Logan pulled into the lot, a familiar figure stepped out of the shadow. Sam Ranger Daniels, a Gulf War veteran and former leader of a nearby MC. His rugged face broke into a faint smile as Logan dismounted. Sam greeted, extending a hand. What brings you here this early? Logan shook his hand firmly. We've got trouble, Sam. A group called the Shadow Serpents has been targeting the Haven. They're trying to force Nora to give it up, and they're not taking no for an answer. Sam's expression darkened. I've heard about those guys, mean as snakes and twice as slip. That's why we need all the help we can get. Logan said the Haven isn't just a shelter. It's a symbol of everything we fought for if we let them take it. What does that say about us? Sam nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing with determination. You've got my crew. We be there. As Sam made a few calls, Logan felt a wave of relief wash over him. One call down, but there were still others to make later. That day, Logan and Franklin Serge Mitchell sat around a table in the shelter's common room. A list of contacts spread before them. Sarge, his cane resting against his chair, scanned the list with a critical eye. Most of these guys haven't been active in years. Sarge said, his voice tinged with doubt. You really think they'll show up for this? Logan met his gaze evenly. If there's one thing I know about vets, it's that we never forget where we came from. This isn't just about the shelter, it's about standing up for each other, like we always have. SG nodded, his skepticism giving way to a quiet resolve. All right, let's start making calls. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls, each one a mix of urgency and camaraderie. Some of the voices on the other end were hesitant at first, but as Logan and Sarge explained the situation, the hesitation melted away. One call stood out in particular: Dwayne Tank Harris, a Desert Storm veteran known for his larger-than-life personality, answered with his usual boisterous energy. Logan, you son of a gun, Tank, boomed through the phone. What's this? I hear about some snakes causing trouble. Logan chuckled. Despite the tension, we could use your help, Tank. Bring anyone you've got. You kidding me? Tank replied, I'll bring everyone and a barbecue too. Logan hung up, a small smile playing at his lips, despite the seriousness of the situation. The unwavering loyalty of his fellow vets was a source of strength. By the time the sun began to set, the shelter's parking lot was no longer quiet. One by one, bikes rolled in their riders, greeted with firm handshakes and knowing nods. Sam arrived. With his crew, their jackets bearing the logo of the Lone Wolves MC Tank, followed soon after, his laugh echoing across the lot as he exchanged stories with Sarge. Even some of the older veterans who had long since left the biker world showed up, their determination written in the lines of their weathered faces. Logan stood at the center of it all, his arms crossed as he surveyed the growing crowd beside him. Sarge leaned on his cane, his eyes scanning the familiar faces with a mix of pride. In gratitude, you did it, Logan, Sarge said quietly. Logan shook his head. We did it, and now we make sure those snakes never come back. As the last few bikes pulled in, Logan stepped forward, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. Thank you all for coming, he began. This isn't just about protecting a building, it's about protecting each other. The Shadow Serpents think they can take what's ours tonight. We show them they're wrong. A cheer erupted from the crowd, the sound echoing into the night. The stage was set, and the Haven was ready for whatever came next. As dawn broke, the one quiet parking lot of the Haven was now a hive of activity. The deep rumble of motorcycle engines mingled with the sounds of hammers, saws, and the occasional laughter of veterans and townsfolk working side by side. Word of the Shadow Serpent threats had spread through the small community, and with it came an outpouring of support. Nora Beacon Walker stood near the entrance, watching in awe as more people arrived. Families and pickup trucks brought supplies, lumber, nails, and food, while neighbors walked over carrying tools. It was as if the entire town had come together, unified by a shared sense of purpose. One of the first to RV that morning was Martha Carter, the owner of the local hardware store. She stepped out of her truck, her arms laden with donated supplies. Nora. Martha called, her voice firm but warm. You've done so much for this town. It's about time we return the favor. Nora rushed forward to help her unload Martha. This is more than I could have asked for. Thank you. Martha gave her a small smile. Honey, you didn't ask. But when bullies like those bikers come around, we all know what's at stake inside the shelter. The veterans worked tirelessly to reinforce the building's defenses. Logan Shield Parker directed a group of bikers and locals as they replaced broken windows with plywood and reinforced doors with steel brackets. Make sure the hinges are solid, Logan said, crouching next to Donnie Hammer Evans, who was fastening a metal plate to the back door. We can't have any weak points nearby. SGE supervised a group of younger volunteers setting up motion-activated floodlights around the perimeter. His cane tapped the ground with every step, but his voice carried the same authority it had in his military days. Angle those lights toward the main gate, Sergeant struck. If they come back, we'll see them before they get close. Ray Doc Simmons, a veteran who had brought medical supplies, approached Nora with a small kit in hand. Here, he said, handing it to her just in case. Leighton. Hope you won't need it, but better safe than sorry. Nora accepted it with a grateful smile. Thank you, Doc, for everything. By mid-morning, even more townsfolk had arrived. Among them was Tommy Hensley, the town's mechanic, who brought a team of workers to help fortify the outer fence. If those bikers want trouble, they'll have to get through this first, Tommy said with a determined grin as he welded a new section of the gate. Others pitched in wherever they could, Claire Dawson, the town librarian, organized the volunteers, ensuring that everyone had a task. Children painted over the hateful graffiti left by the Shadow Serpents, their small hands turning the crude messages into bright murals of hope. As the work continued, the smell of freshly cooked food wafted through the air. Maria Alvarez, the owner of a local diner, had set up a table laden with sandwiches, coffee, and pastries. You can't fight on an empty stomach, Maria declared, handing a plate to Sarge. Sarge chuckled, taking the plate with a nod. You've got that right, Maria. And trust me, this is better than any I've ever had. By noon, the shelter had transformed into a fortress, but more importantly, it had become a beacon of unity. Nora stood at the center of it all, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and determination. She climbed onto a small platform near the sow entrance, her voice cutting through the noise. Everyone can. I have your attention? The chatter died down as the crowd turned to her. I don't have the words to thank you all for what you've done today. Nora began, her voice steady despite the emotion. In her chest, this shelter means the world to me. But seeing all of you here, it reminds me that it means just as much to this town. We're stronger together, and no one, no biker gang, no threat can take that away from us. The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing across the parking lot. Logan stepped up beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. You said it, Nora, he said with a grin. Now let's make sure they understand it too. The day ended with a renewed sense of purpose. The community and veterans standing side by side, ready for whatever came next, as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the parking lot. The atmosphere around the haven grew more serious. The day of hard work had fortified the shelter, but the knowledge that the Shadow Serpents could arrive at any moment weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Logan Shield. Parker stood near the main gate, his sharp eyes scanning the newly reinforced perimeter, the chain link fence now glinted with fresh welds, and motion-activated floodlights had been strategically placed to cover every angle behind him. Sarge walked slowly, leaning on his cane, but keeping a watchful eye on the final preparations. Logan, Sarge said, his voice low but steady. We've done all we can to secure the place now. We just need to make sure everyone's ready. Logan nodded, his jaw tight. They'll come at night when they think we're vulnerable, but they're in for a surprise inside the shelter. Nora Beacon Walker was busy organizing supplies in the kitchen. Medical kits, flashlights, and walkie-talkies were laid out in neat rows on the counter. Ray Dew Simmons was there as well, showing a few volunteers how to treat basic injuries. You've got to stay calm. In the heat of the moment, Doc explained, holding up a bandage if someone gets hurt. Panic won't help them. Nora listened intently, her hands methodically arranging rolls of gauze she appreciated. Doc's calm demeanor, it helped her feel more prepared even as the tension in her chest grew. Logan entered the room, his presence commanding. As always. Nora, how's it looking in here? She turned to face him, wiping her hand on her apron. We're as ready as we'll ever be, but I can't shake this feeling like it's the calm before the storm. Logan stepped closer, his expression softening slightly. It is, he admitted. But, not alone in this. We've got your back. Nora? All of us. Her lips curved into a faint smile, and she nodded. I know. And that's what keeps me going outside the veterans in towns. Folk were finalizing their positions. Groups of 3 or 4 were assigned to different areas of the shelter, each armed with tools, makeshift barricades, and unwavering determination. Donnie Hammer Evans stood near the back gate, testing the strength of the new steel reinforcements that ought to hold. He said, slapping the metal with a satisfied grin. Let's see those snakes try to break through this at the main entrance. Sarge gathered the younger volunteers for a quick briefing. Despite his age, his voice carried the same authority that had once led men into battle. Listen up, he said, his gaze sweeping over the group. We're not looking for a fight, but if they bring one to us, we stand our ground, watch out for each other, and remember this place isn't just a building. It's a promise, and we don't break promises. His words settled over the group like a calming weight, replacing nervous energy with quiet resolve as night fell. The shelter was bathed in the harsh glow of the floodlights. The veterans and townsfolk took their positions, but in the brief lull before the confrontation, a rare moment of quiet, it allowed for reflection. Nora stood outside near the memorial, while her fingers tracing the engraved names of her father's unit. Her thoughts drifted to the sacrifices he had made and the values he had instilled in her. Sarge approached his cane, tapping softly against the gravel. "You all right, kid?" Nora glanced at him, her eyes shimmering in the dim light. "I was just thinking about my dad, about how much he would have loved to see this place the way it is now." Sarge nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Your dad was one hell of a man, and you're, just like him, stubborn as a mule and twice as strong." She laughed softly, the sound tinged with emotion. "Thanks, Sarge." That means a lot. Before he could respond, Logan's voice rang out from the front gate. "They're here." Nora's heart skipped a beat as the distant rumble of motorcycles filled the air. The Shadow Serpents had arrived. Sarge straightened his cane, forgotten as his military instincts kicked in. "All right, people," he barked, his voice cutting through the night positions. "Let's show these snakes what we're made of." Nora took a deep breath, her fear giving way to a steely determination. This was her home, her sanctuary, and she wasn't about to let anyone take it away. The deep, guttural roar of motorcycle engines filled the night, a menacing symphony that sent shivers through the defenders at the Haven. The floodlights cast sharp beams across the parking lot, illuminating the arrival of the Shadow Serpent MC. The gang rolled in like a dark tide, their black leather jackets. Glinting under the harsh lights at the head of the group was Troy Viper Morgan, his expression cold and calculating as he surveyed the fortified shelter from her position near the entrance. Nora Beacon Walker watched with a mix of fear and determination. Logan Shield Parker stood beside her, his sharp gaze locked on the approaching bikers. "Stay close." Logan said, his voice low and firm. "This is going to get ugly." Nora nodded, her grip tightening on the walkie-talkie in her hand. Around them, defenders, veterans, bikers, and townsfolk took their positions. The lines had been drawn and there was no turning back now. Troy dismounted his bike and stepped forward, his boots crunching against the gravel. He held up his hands mockingly, as if to show he meant no harm. "You've been busy," he called out, his voice echoing across the lot. "Nice little fortress you've built here." Logan stepped forward to meet him, his shoulders squared. "You've had your fun. Troy, now turn around and leave before this gets worse for you." Troy's smirk widened. "Worse for me? Oh, Logan, you've got it all wrong. This is going to be fun." With a sharp nod from Troy, the Shadow Serpents surged forward, their chains and bats gleaming in the light. The defenders braced themselves, their grips tightening on makeshift weapons, bats, hammers, and lengths of pipe. The first clash was chaotic. Logan intercepted one of the bikers with a swift punch, sending him sprawling to the ground. Sarge, despite his age, held his own near the entrance, using his cane like a weapon to trip and jab at the attackers at the back gate. Donnie Hammer Evans and a group of volunteers stood firm as two bikers tried to break through. "Not today," Donnie shouted, swinging his hammer to block the intruders inside. The shelter Nora was busy directing the flow of supplies and relaying messages over the walkie-talkie, but when she saw two bikers heading toward the memorial wall, something inside her snapped. She grabbed a crowbar and ran outside. "Hey," she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. The bikers turned to face her, their sneers quickly replaced by surprise as Nora swung the crowbar with all her strength. The first blow landed squarely on one biker's arm, making him drop his chain. "You've got guts, lady!" the second biker growled, advancing on her before he could reach her. Logan appeared, tackling him to the ground. "Stay away from her," Logan roared, landing a punch that knocked the biker out cold. Nora's chest heaved as she looked at Logan. "Thanks," she managed to say. Logan nodded, his expression serious. "You did good, Nora, but stay close to the others." As the fight raged on, it became clear that the defenders were holding their ground. The Shadow Serpents, used to intimidation and chaos, were unprepared for the disciplined resistance of the veterans and their allies. Troy, however, refused to back down. He stormed toward the center of the lot, his eyes blazing with fury. He locked eyes with Sarge, who stood calmly with his cane in hand. "You think you're tough, old man?" Troy sneered. Sarge smirked. "Took her, then you'll ever be son." Troy lunged forward, but Sarge sidestepped with surprising agility, using his cane to hook Troy's ankle and send him sprawling. The crowd erupted in cheers as Sarge stood over him. "That's for disrespecting this place." Sarge said, his voice cold. Meanwhile, Logan and Donnie worked together to take down the remaining bikers. Move was precise, honed by years of experience. Slowly but surely, the Shadow Serpents began to retreat. Their confidence, shattered desperation etched across his face. Troy scrambled to his feet, grabbing a discarded chain. He turned to Nora, who stood near the memorial wall, and advanced on her with a predatory glare. "Nora!" Logan shouted, but Troy was already too close. Nora didn't flinch. She grabbed the folded flag from the wall and held it tightly in her hands. "You think you can scare me?" she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "You're nothing compared to the people. This place stands for Troy," hesitated for a split second, and that was all the opening. Logan needed. He tackled Troy to the ground, pinning him with a knee to the chest. "This is over, Troy," Logan growled. "Get out of here before you end up in the back of a squad car." Troy spat a curse but didn't resist. Logan hauled him to his feet and shoved him toward his crew. "You've lost." Logan said, his voice calm but commanded, "And if you ever come back, we won't be so forgiving with that." The Shadow Serpents mounted their bikes and roared away, their once proud swagger replaced by humiliation. As the sound of motorcycles faded into the distance, a wave of relief swept over the haven. The defenders began to cheer their victory. Hard-won but deeply satisfying. Nora stood near the memorial wall, her hand still clutching the flag. Logan approached. His expression softening. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We did it." Logan smiled. "No, Nora. You did it nearby." Sarge leaned on his cane, watching the scene with quiet pride. "We showed them," he said, his voice full of satisfaction. "This place isn't just a building, it's a home, and no one takes our home from us." As the first rays of dawn broke over the haven, the shelter stood as a beacon of resilience, its defenders ready for whatever came next. The first light of dawn painted the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, casting a warm glow over the battered but unbroken shelter. The haven stood as a testament to resilience, its reinforced walls and repaired gates, now symbols of victory inside the site. Shelter. A quiet hum of activity replaced the chaos of the night before. Volunteers were sweeping up debris, mending broken chairs, and cleaning the common room. Despite the visible signs of the battle, there was an undeniable sense of triumph in the air. Nora Beacon. Walker stood in the kitchen, leaning against the counter as she watched the coffee machine percolate. Her body ached and her hands were still shaking slightly, but her heart was light. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel hope. Logan Shield Parker walked in, his leather jacket slung over one shoulder. His face was smudged with dirt and a faint bruise darkened his jaw, but he wore a small, tired smile. "You're up early," he said, his voice warm. Nora handed him a cup of coffee. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Too much adrenaline, I guess." Logan nodded, taking a sip. "You did good last night, Nora. Better than good." She chuckled softly. "I think my dad would have been proud." Logan leaned against the counter beside her. "He would have been, and so are we in the main hall." Franklin S.G.E. Mitchell sat at a table surrounded by a group of veterans and townsfolk. He held a cup of tea in one hand and his cane in the other. His posture railed, relaxed but alert. "You know, Sarge," began his voice steady, "I've been through a lot of battles in my life. But last night, that was something special." Ray Doc Simmons chuckled from across the table. "Special? You mean because we actually won the group?" Laughed the sound of welcome break. From the tension of the previous day, Maria Alvarez, the diner owner who had provided food during the preparations, walked in with a tray of breakfast burritos. "I don't know how you all kept going last night," she said, placing the tray on the table. "But I'm glad you did." Sarge gave her a grateful nod. "We didn't have a choice. Maria, this place isn't just a building, it's a home, and it stands for something bigger than all of us." The room fell quiet for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. Later that morning, the defenders gathered outside near the memorial wall. The names etched into the granite seemed to shine under the golden sunlight, a solemn reminder of the sacrifices that had been made. Nora stepped forward, holding the folded flag she had defended so fiercely the night before. Her voice trembled slightly as she began to speak. "This shelter has always been more than a building," she said, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "It's a promise to the people whose names are on this wall, to the veterans who come here seeking peace, and to this community that has stood by us last night. We kept that promise." She unfolded the flag and handed it to Sarge. "Sarge, would you do the honors with steady hands?" Sarge hoisted the flag B. Back up the pole as it unfurrowed, the crowd fell silent, watching as it caught the breeze and fluttered proudly against the sky. Logan stepped forward, his voice firm but filled with emotion. "The Shadow Serpents thought they could intimidate us, take what's ours, and leave us broken. They were wrong last night. We proved that when we stand together, there's nothing we can't protect." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing across the parking lot in the weeks that followed. The Haven became a beacon of hope and unity. News of the shelter stand against the Shadow Serpent spread, drawing attention from veteran groups and supporters across the region. Donations poured in, allowing the shelter to expand its services and repair its facilities. Local businesses offered their support, organizing fundraisers and events to keep the momentum going. Nora found herself busier than ever, but she welcomed the challenge. Each new face that walked through the shelter's doors reminded her of why she had fought so hard to protect it. One afternoon, as she organized a shipment of supplies, Logan appeared in the doorway. "You've got visitors," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Nora stepped outside to find a group of veterans from a nearby town. Their leader, a tall woman named Harper, extended a hand. "We heard about what you did here," Harper said, her voice steady. "You inspired us. We want to help." Nora shook her hand, a smile spreading across her face. "Welcome to the Haven on a quiet evening." Nora sat on the bench near the memorial wall, the names glowing softly under the newly installed lights. Sarge joined her, his cane tapping lightly against the ground. "You've done good, kid," he said, his voice filled with pride. Nora looked at him, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without all of you." Sarge chuckled. "Maybe not, but you're the heart of this place, Nora, and that makes all the difference." As they sat in silence, the sound of motorcycles echoed. Faintly in the distance, not the Shadow Serpents, but the Vietnam vets MC writing information as they returned to the shelter. Nora watched them approach, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and peace. The Haven wasn't just a shelter, it was a sanctuary. And thanks to the courage and unity of everyone who stood to defend it, it would remain so for generations to come in the face of overwhelming odds. The defenders of the Haven showed us that unity and courage can triumph over intimidation, nor is unwavering determination. Sarge's wisdom and the community's strength came together to protect not just a building, but a legacy of honor and sacrifice. This story reminds us all of the power of standing up for what truly matters here on Karen Tales. We celebrate stories of resilience, bravery, and the bonds that hold us together. What did this story mean to you? Have you ever witnessed a community coming together like this? Or do you have your own tale of standing strong in the face of adversity? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, please show your support by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing it with someone who values courage and unity, and subscribing to Karen Tales for more uplifting stories. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another tale of resilience and humanity. Thank you for being part of our journey together. Let's continue sharing stories that inspire, uplift. We'll see you in the next video.